Welcome to the t-roh Show, special edition number 8. This is your host, Keith. Um Commonly, when I do special editions, Stu or Tony don't come on. John happens to be here. He was invited to come and listen, and also Laney. So there was the reason why the special edition came up is there was an individual that asked uh, for us to go over title, I think it was 8 U.S. Code 1502, certificate of nationality issued by a Secretary of State for a person not a naturalized citizen of the United States for use in proceedings of a foreign state. So it's basically for court proceedings is what they're doing. And I decided to go over it through Cornell Law. They're pretty good at being accurate in their assessments of law and all that. So I'll just read this to you. This will be the boring part. It won't last long. The Secretary of State is authorized to issue in his discretion and in accordance with rules and regulations prescribed by him. So what that actually says is, in his discretion, he can decide whether you can have a nationality or not. That's a slave system, by the way. A certificate of nationality for any person not naturalized citizen of the United States who presents satisfactory evidence that he is an American national. And keep in mind that this is a lowercase n. The government of the United States of America uses the upper and lowercase n. And that such certificate is needed for the use in judicial or administrative proceedings in a foreign state. Such certificate shall be solely for the use in the case for which it is issued and shall be transmitted by the Secretary of State. You can't touch it. You cannot have it in your possession in any way, through appropriate official channels to the judicial or administrative officers of the foreign state in which it is be used. So you can't touch your own certificate of nationality if you had one in any way, and it's in his discretion, which is a violation of Article 15 UDHR. It's a violation of rights. And he sets out the rules and regulations on how that happens. Now, people will say, well, they got you. Okay, you see, there's an American, you can get a certificate of nationality from the United States. So you guys are crazy, blah, 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 blah. Can we agree with that?
Yep.
Okay. Now, so they're crazy. There's no reason to go back to the Articles of Confederation and revamp them or amend them in any way. This was all crazy, stupid. You can get your nationality, so this whole thing is over. However, if you read the word state, the term includes the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Virgin Islands of the United States, and the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands. Now, if it said in legalese, okay, when it says includes, that's exclusive. If you use the word includes, that means you're only talking about the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Virgin Islands of the United States, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. That's all you're talking about. You're not talking about anything else. Otherwise, it would read includes but not limited to. So you guys can see that, right? That pop up? John?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so I just want to make sure everybody was seeing the pop up.
Yeah, I can see it loud and clear.
So it would say include but not limited to the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, Guam, and all that. That would mean that you guys within the states of the United States could get your certificate of nationality, but that only includes these types, right here, these areas, which means you can't get a nationality, American national certificate from any of the states. With they call them contiguous states or continental, the United States is what they call it. Okay, so you just have to look at that. If you look at it from that point of view, that would mean that you would have to be a national of the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Virgin Islands of the United States, and the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands in order to be able to receive a American national certificate. It has nothing to do with the states of the Union, period. Remember, the United States is foreign to the states of the Union under the rule of private international law.
Yep, sure is.
So can't do it, guys. And it says a certificate of nationality for not nationalized. Okay, then it goes to the United States. You can click that. Except as otherwise specifically here and provided when used in a geographical sense. Then they say means the continental United States, Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Virgin Islands of the United States, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. There you go. Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Guam, blah, 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 blah. Goes right there. Except as otherwise specifically herein provided when used in a geographical sense. So you can't, you won't be able to get a certificate of nationality unless it's a part of one of those. Now people will say, oh, they screwed up. Because then they'll go back and say, what's the continental United States? Means the continental United States. Okay. So I believe we had one of those in here, didn't we?
Yes,
Okay,
I
lifting
believe we
to
did.
the continental United States. Okay, continental United States. There it is right there. Okay, the idea of here is the states and their subdivisions. Now, the primary political unit of the United States is the state. Excuse me, that's a political unit. Okay? According to the numerous decisions of the United States Supreme Court, the 50 individual states and the United States as a whole are each sovereign jurisdictions. They didn't call them sovereign states. The 13 original states, 13 colonies declared independence from the British Empire in 1776 and 1777, they established a collective government under the Articles of Confederation. The Constitution of the United States of America, they say in here, we don't agree with this, but superseded the Articles in 1789 in the sense that it established and superimposed a consolidated political government over the Confederation Union of Geographical States. This is called an overlay survey. A consolidated political government over the Confederated Union of Geographical States. So in the sense that it says it superseded in the Articles in 79, in the sense that it established and superimposed a consolidated political government. So the Constitution for the United States of America establishes a political government for the federal government of the United States, which includes, among other things, judicial review, power to regulate citizenship, power to coin money, power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among several states, conduct foreign policy, and make all the laws which shall be necessary for proper and carrying into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or any department or officer thereof. Now, the idea of dual sovereignty or separate sovereigns is derived from the 10th Amendment, they call it, to the Constitution, which states that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states. Now, all of a sudden, we're talking about upper and lowercase states, completely different, by the way, than what? Political unit of this state. That's a political unit. This is an actual state. Are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So they said the United States Supreme Court held that political states do not have the right to secede, though it did not allow some possibility of divisibility, or it did allow, the possibility of divisibility through revolution or through consent of the states. So you got to fight in order to get the hell out. So this whole idea that California is trying to break up into the 51st state, this is why they can't do it, because they're in a political state, not an actual state. It says 4 states, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Kentucky, call themselves commonwealths. The word commonwealth in this context refers to the commonwealth or welfare of the public. The term has no legal impact. It doesn't mean any difference. It makes no difference. While state governments within the United States may enact their own laws and prosecute crimes pursuant thereto, they are not sovereign. Now listen to this very carefully. So you know where this government and the United States of America is coming from. Okay. In the Westphalian sense in international law, which says that each state has sovereignty over its territory and domestic affairs to the exclusion of all external powers, on the principle of non interference in another state's domestic affairs, and that each state, no matter how large or small, is equal in international law. Additionally, the member states of the United States do not possess international legal sovereignty, meaning they are not recognized by other sovereign states, such as, for example, France, Germany, or United Kingdom, nor do they possess full independence, sovereignty, meaning they cannot control movement of persons across state borders. Now, listen to that specifically. Do not possess full interdependence and sovereignty, meaning they cannot control movement of persons across state borders. They're political subdivisions. So when everybody says that the United States, that there about the United States, that there's a union of states, there is no such thing in political states. They're all the same state. They're just divided into 50 different 50 different political states of the same state.
Political divisions of the same state.
Right. So there's no union there. You can't have a union because you have to, in order to have a union, you have to have two separate sovereign states to come together under an agreement of a union. So the whole idea of a union was just wiped out. So they only said that it superseded in a political sense, but it didn't supersede it at all. Meaning it did not supersede the Articles of Confederation in any way, shape, or form. And we've proven that in past broadcasts of the t-roh show, where we talked about it was just the Masons that did it, and just because the Masons did it, whatever, doesn't really matter. So I started looking at the names of states, and people were real confused about that. So we're gonna change that, and it's not your fault because they actually did it themselves. So I looked up some of the original constitutions, and you'll notice it's called the state of Minnesota. Okay, so we, the people of the state of Minnesota, are grateful to God for our civil and religious liberty, and desiring to perpetuate its blessings and secure the same to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution. Okay, so that's the name of the state right here, state of Minnesota. That's the name of the state. You can't change that.
That's the geographic state.
Yeah, you can't call that Minnesota. You can't call it MN or anything like that. That's the name of the state. You can have many different types of governments under it, but you cannot change the name of the state. So what do these guys do? They go around and change the name of the state. We, the people of the state of Minnesota. They change it to a lowercase. This is a separate constitution from this one here. That's what we're trying to tell people. This was done in August 29th, 1857. This is a completely separate constitution. This is what they call a political constitution right here, because they change it. This is right out of minnesota.gov. So we didn't make it up. It's their website. So think about that for a minute. You have two separate constitutions. That's a state within a state. Plus you have secret societies known as the Masonic Temple and all them. They have an oath and affirmation to their Masonic order. So that's also a state within a state. So what they did was they created their state within a state and played it off like it was the original state. And it's not. This is the original state. And this original state is independent. So that's your independent state, state of Minnesota. This is where you can have your citizenship, and this is the state that we work with right here. Nobody's there. Everybody was trafficked to this one, to this political state. Okay, and this is where this was created by an offshore trust. That's how we see this. Okay, so that being the case, if you're not within the state of Minnesota is still within the political states. Let me go back to this. Okay, a political unit of the United States cannot change the name of a state. It's impossible. There's no political right that says you can change the name of a state. So we the people of the there was no comma here either, by the way. We the people of the state of Minnesota are not the same people as we the people of the state of Minnesota that created this thing. And this is what we mean by U.S. states of Minnesota. It's a state within a state created by secret societies and trafficked you to the United States, wherein the United States is foreign to the states of the Union under the rule of private international law. Private international law means if you have a trust in another country established somewhere else, say you have a private trust and it's established in France, and you're within the one of the states of the Union, you have a trust there, and you do business in both places, or you do business over there, that falls under private international law because it's a private trust. They did the same exact thing here. So this is how you were trafficked. They did it through the Social Security number and the Ponzi scheme there. Once you got the Social Security number, you were originally born in this state here, the state of Minnesota, but you were trafficked to this one, a political subdivision of the United States. So that's what we're trying to get across to people, that the United States of America, meaning the uppercase T under the Articles of Confederation, can only recognize this state here. It cannot recognize this one. This is how they changed your constitution or state constitutions. It's also based under corporate, because what we figured out is the U.S. Virgin Islands Internal Revenue Trust owns the corporate federal government United States. It's federal corporation, they call it. So I believe it's under Title 18, where the United States means federal corporation. And it changed everything. Absolutely changed everything. It changed everything because over here it says naturalized citizen of the United States. This is the state they're talking about, which is District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands of the United States, and the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands. That's what they're actually talking about within this particular Title 8, 1502. That's just how we see it, because that's what it says. So keep in mind that the United States of America, the original 1781 or 1776, 1777, in that area, that was styled the United States of America, that is where this state of Minnesota is. And that is where your person is being moved. So when you do a resident declaration in the original Union, your person is actually being delivered from this political subdivision over to the original state. And there's been so many people coming out saying that the state of Minnesota, this is the corporate state of Minnesota, it's a corporation. No, it's not. It's the name of the original state. You have to go by the name of the original state. You cannot change it. You see, folks, under international law, this is highly illegal. Highly illegal to do this. You cannot do this. And that is treason against the state of Minnesota, because you did something, you changed the record, you changed the name of it, and that's a intent to overthrow. That's how it works. So at any rate, this is where they did it. Minnesota.gov did it. And everybody knows who did it. It was the lawyers. They want to tell you it's the Constitution of the state of Minnesota, but they did change it right here and kind of slipped it in there. Lawyers did this. They're a part of the bar. They're part of Antifa, and they're a part of the National Lawyers Guild, which is a communist organization. So that's the communists that did this. They slipped in and did this to your country. Once one of these is changed, a lot of them are changed. They moved around. They've done all kinds of things. And people would think, well, what's the difference between this and this? This is a huge difference. One is what? It's a political unit of the United States as a state. That's just the political unit of it, of the same country. Okay. The other is an actual state where you have citizenship and you can control your borders and that kind of thing. That's where you would need a union. When you have states that are actual states that can control their borders and boundaries and all that, people have to have a passport to go from one state to another through a union passport. That makes more sense. The way that they have it connected now, what's the difference? You might as well just have one major country, forget the states altogether. Why have political subdivisions and go through all this malarkey on saying that you have 50 states and it's a union and all that? It's not. So what we're doing is when we're bringing you back to the original state, this is where you would need a passport to go from state to state. And we have a passport, by the way, called the United States of America passport. And it works very well, by the way. It really does. It works extremely well when going from one place to another. Now, when this kind of thing happens, this is called what they call trafficking in persons. We've discussed this on the 56th broadcast of the t-roh show. We're going to talk about it a little bit about it again because I found another document that was hidden. It was unentitled here into the ohchr.org website. Kind of hidden in here. They throw things in that a lot of people just don't go and read this kind of stuff. They're usually dealing with the Kardashians and all that. Okay, we've talked about this before. It says the international definition of trafficking in the trafficking protocols defines the term trafficking in persons as follows. Trafficking in persons shall mean the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of the threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of the abuse of power, or the position of vulnerability, or the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person for the purpose of exploitation. Exploitation shall include, at a minimum, the exploitation of the prostitution of others and other forms of sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude or the removal of organs, the consent of a victim of trafficking persons to the intended exploitation set forth in subparagraph A of this article shall be irrelevant where any means as set forth in subparagraph A have been used, Article 3. So, the three key elements that must be present for a situation of trafficking in persons, adults to exist, are therefore action, recruitment, means, threat. So, if you're being threatened, when you tell a police officer that you're not a U.S. citizen, and he blows that completely off, throws you in jail, and all this other stuff, that's called trafficking in persons. And then you'll have judges coming in and say, well, did we sign that? Yeah, you did. You guys signed this. You signed off on it, and every one of you signed it. Your political states signed it, which was, I can't believe you did, but you did. Okay? Means threat. And the purpose, exploitation. International law provides a different definition for trafficking in children, persons under 18 years of age. This means the element not required in this case is necessary to show. Let me go ahead and bring that up a little bit more so people can see that. Actions such as recruitment, buying, and selling. Oh, that sounds a little bit like adoption, adopting children out. That this action was for the specific purpose of exploitation. In other words, trafficking of a child will exist if a child was subjected to some act, such as recruitment or transport, and purpose of which which is the exploitation of that child. That's called trafficking their person. You're trafficking the child. So political parties, folks, under the Convention on Political Rights, do not have the authority to change the name of states, nor do they have the authority to force you into their political party, especially if their political party are 528 private corporations. So the Republicans and Democrats do not have the right to pull you into their political state outside of the original state. They do not have the political will or the right to take you from this state here to this state here. That's illegal. It's against every law on the planet. Political rights are political rights. Everyone has them. They're exercised equally. So by getting rid of your voter's card, that doesn't do it. Okay, because the original state may, and I believe we have proven this, that the original state requires an oath. So what we did is if you take an oath to the United States of America, meaning the uppercase T, the United States of America, and let me get this, I think I'm going to do this real specifically because a lot of people get very confused about what we're talking about. I'll stop sharing. And I'm going to type this out so everybody gets it. Okay. When we say the United States of America, most people think this. ICA. Okay. They think this one. That is the federalized political state. Okay? Within the United States.
Could you make that type a little bit bigger, Keith, so you can read it, Felicia?
How's that?
There you go. A lot gooder.
Okay. Now, the Masons just changed the T so nobody would figure out what they were doing, and they did it way back when. They also made a treaty with Britain under this entity, making the prince the arch treasurer of this particular, the United States of America. That was in the Treaty of Paris in 1783. We've proven that also and talked about it in earlier programs. So this, the United States of America, is not the country. This is a political organization. Now, this is the name of the country. So when we're saying the United States of America, we're saying this entity here, not this one. This is a federalized political organization where this is an actual country right here. Now, this particular entity here falls under, let's go back over here, falls under the Westphalian sense in international law, which says that each state has sovereignty over its territory and domestic affairs to the exclusion of all external powers. Okay? This one here does not. And we've had a couple of judges even just misinterpret what we're actually saying because they're talking about political this, political that, blah blah blah. They're not understanding that there's a difference here, or they are understanding there's a difference and they're trying to traffic the guy back into their political state. So this is what happens if you have the state of Minnesota right here, okay, or state of Minnesota, and they put in state of Minnesota, SOTA, okay, right here, that's a state within a state. This state is within this state. That's illegal. Can't do that. You also cannot put in a political states within the United States of America. This, under 1789, is illegal. Completely illegal under international law. It's illegal under this clause here. The Westphalian sense in international law. Okay? They are not sovereign in the Westphalian sense in international law. So they're not equal in international law. And they also say right here that the member states of the United States do not possess international legal sovereignty. So what's the point, folks? You don't have a union. You only have political administrations of the United States, which is Manhattan Island, and the jurisdiction of the United States, which is the District of Columbia. That's it. You don't have a union. So you can't have that. This is why their postal union is messed up and everything's messed up. Everything is completely screwed up because of this illegal setup. And people are confused everywhere. They don't even, that's why they were asking us, go to the certificate of nationality and go over it. Well, you can't, because you have to be a national of one of these entities here in order to get that American national status, this American national status here. And they don't even let you touch it. They don't even let you have possession of it. And that's why it's so difficult to get. So when people are going to the Secretary of State of the United States to get their we call it their birth certificate authenticated, seriously, come on. They can't authenticate that birth certificate. They're not even in that venue. They're foreigners to the states of the Union. They're foreigners to this state right here. You don't even have a government put together under this state in any way, shape, or form under this Constitution right here. And all the constitutions are the same. They all did the same thing. So whenever you use the term Minnesota, that's not the state of Minnesota. That's a political entity of the United States. If you just use the word Minnesota or MN. And we keep trying to tell people, if you go back to the original constitutions, you'll figure out the name of the state that you're talking about. And when they move you, it's called trafficking in persons. This is under the state.gov. Okay, this is the U.S. Department of State. Okay, a stateless person is someone who is not considered as a national by any state under the operation of its law. So they'll tell people, oh yeah, you're a U.S. citizen, so you're U.S. national. No, you're not. U.S. national of what? You were born in a foreign state. When did you naturalize? It's okay. Now think about it. If you were born in the state of Minnesota, the original state, you have to be naturalized as a citizen of the United States. And it says here, for any person not naturalized, not a naturalized citizen of the United States. So you have to be naturalized. So you wouldn't be able to get this nationality certificate anyways. Am I correct on that? I mean,
That's right.
Now, it says UNHCR estimates 10 million people, approximately one third of whom are children, are stateless today. Well, you better put on another 350 on that because all U.S. citizens are stateless because you're not considered a national by
That,
any state under the operation of its law.
yeah, and that includes all the politicians up there too that think they're somebody.
I know. They're all just bankrupt. And we talked about the bankruptcy of 1933. And in essence, that's all gone. Their constitution is gone and everything else. For the life of us, we've been trying to figure out how they're operating. And we did figure it out last time, which was in the, we filed it, how they're operating. So let's go there.
What's really funny though, Keith, is the fact that they traffic themselves and didn't even realize it.
Yeah, I know. They're freaking crazy. There we go. This is the ultimate of ignorance, and I don't laugh because I'm laughing at them. I'm laughing because it's so bad you just have to laugh because that's one of my traits. It's I laugh when the pressure gets on. It's like, oh my God, man, what kind of people are you to live? Okay, this is basically the way I see this. In order to understand this, you have to understand what somebody would do to you to humiliate you in the most heinous sense, to humiliate you in ignorance, to treat you the way that they treated you. They have embarrassed the crap out of every so-called educated individual, even the Harvard graduates and Yale graduates of the country do not see this. They have played you for a fool, and it's hard to take. We get it. We get what's going on. They played you for a fool, and it's so hard to accept that someone would do that to you. That's the part that's so difficult for a lot of people to accept. And why this is somebody had hated you so much that they don't mind humiliating you the way they do, the way they did on your person, the most sacred of things, of your identity, your who you are, what country you came from, and the whole thing. It's humiliating to realize that that is what's been done to you, that somebody hated you so much that this was the plan they concocted and worked to implement against you, and use the fact that the next generation would not know any of this and use their ignorance against them. That's a sick dude. That's somebody that's extremely sick. So we put this out. The international trustees of the Virgin Islands Bureau of Internal Revenue Trust are hereby noticed by the Committee for the Government of the United States of America. So this is what happens in private international trusts. Okay, it's the same kind of as what they do in other trusts. So sometime before the 4th day of September 2017, the trustees, principals, and agents of the Virgin Islands Bureau of Internal Revenue and Trust, registered to do business within the U.S. Virgin Islands, convened and wrote within its minutes authorizing the National Guard to seize arms, ammunition, etc., to carry out its emergency mission. Don't believe us? Okay. You know the t-roh show, we're always going to come up with proof. So here's the actual order itself. And The Adjutant General is authorized to direct and seize arms, ammunition, explosives, incendiary material, and any other property that may be required by the military forces for the performance of this emergency mission. Okay, in accordance with the rules of force. You use the word mission, it's usually under uh, religious. Okay, by the Virgin Islands National Guard and approved by the Virginia Islands Department of Justice. Okay, so it sounds really good. You know, it's approved by this and it's all checked out and it's done by this section and that section and all that fun stuff. Okay, and here's the seal. And the reason why we said sometime before the 4th day of September 2017, because that's had to come from that Internal Revenue Trust first. The same titles and everything else. How do we know that? Okay, Virgin Islands Code and the rights protected granted by Title 23, blah 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 blah. All these titles are trust bylaws, titles and codes. All right. So after 90 days of said order, so if we go September, October, November, December, so we're 90 days in New York. So it goes from the Virgin Islands down by Puerto Rico. It's southeast of Florida. Okay. Goes up to New York. It goes there. Next, after the 90 days of said order, New York Manhattan Island is attempting to use this private international precedent under private international law to implement the same aforementioned trust policies and or bylaws against subjects that are victims of trafficking persons already in use and committed by the same trustees. Okay, so here is New York Forces Firearms Surrender. And this is how they do it. So this is where it becomes translated because it's coming from an offshore trust under U.S. Virgin Islands. So they translate it to make it appear as if it's coming from the states of the Union. And it's not. It moves into their political states, which at this point right now are communist under the National Lawyers Guild and the American Bar Association and Antifa. So an array of gun control groups have allied with New York lawmakers in a push to establish extreme risk protection orders. This is not true. So there's not a bunch of gun control groups. These are the offshore trustees that created this to establish extreme risk protection orders, forcing subjects to surrender their arms. Subjects of what? I thought people were citizens and nationals. What do you mean subjects? Subjects are the same as under some kind of monarchy. Legally, on paper, or it could be a subject of an experiment that voluntarily signed over to be experimented on. So how is it that all of a sudden this wording comes in? And if you ever go watch Cops and all that, they talk about subject is on the run, subject's on the loose, subject which went over the fence, subject did this, subject did that. Well, those are legal terms. Under legal terms, subjects could be the same as what? Traffic persons. The proposal, this is this right here is a confession, by the way, allows police or a member of the subject's family or household to file a petition with the court that could lead to an order prohibiting firearms possession for up to a year if it's believed they pose an imminent risk to themselves or others. Proponents feel the move, already law in California, Oregon, and Washington, would save lives. All they're doing, folks, is they're working under this order in the Virgin Islands. So 5 years ago, New York enacted the NY SAFE Act. Okay, this is not a state. They're going to say, well, that's an abbreviation. Okay, keep telling yourself that. Making our gun violence prevention laws among the strongest in the nation, says Senator Brian Kavanaugh, a Manhattan Democrat and sponsor of S 7133. But even though we have the 48th lowest gun rate of gun deaths in the country, gun violence is still hurting New Yorkers. and we have a responsibility to act. Well, you were the guys, these same guys, that have been running Coke for years, that has caused all this, but now you go after the honest folks so that they can't protect themselves anymore. And look what happened to Germany and England when that happened, and France, when they took their guns away. Now all of them pretty much have to wear hijabs. All right. The avenue to implement the protection order system advocated by Kavanaugh would be a court system, which it's always the court system because that's where the Lawyers Guild is. That's who controls it. Which, upon being presented with a petition that contends an individual's possession of guns in his or her current state could pose a general danger, could authorize an order to confiscate the firearms involved. The subject could then seek a hearing and respond to the petition and present any evidence to have their guns returned. Oh, okay, yeah, that's going to happen. Now, what this is a violation of human rights because it's not about the guns. It's about being able to take your right to own property away. It has nothing to do with the guns. They're just using it. They're using guns and gun violence to be able to regulate your ownership of property, which means they can take away your ownership of property, that property can then be moved offshore into the Internal Revenue Trust. That's what they're trying to do. So under the wording, an array of gun control groups have allied with New York lawmakers in a push to establish extreme risk protection orders, forcing subjects to surrender their firearms. All evidence is printed and placed in evidence. The receivers of the Constitution of the United States have failed to realize a few international facts. Even though the Constitution of the United States states that it had the authority to define and punish offenses against the law of nations, the receivers have failed to understand the Articles of Confederation 1781 was and still is the subject of the law of nations. It was never the private constitution of the United States adopted by the Masonic Order Temple that protected this country. Never was it that. It was and always will be the law of nations as derived from the scriptures that is causing their demise. Okay? The law of nations was under, that's how the Articles of Confederation was written, under the law of nations. And they threw it under the Constitution of the United States to make it appear as if they were international. That the Masons were, Masonic Temple was, Masonic Order, whatever, was an international body. In a sense, they were, but they were still subject of a foreign monarch, which was the Pope. Even though the church says, no, we don't agree with that. We don't agree with that. Sure you don't. The Articles of Confederation as amended August 5th, 2015, and the government thereof is the subject of the law of nations, and therefore the trust minutes of the aforementioned trust is in violation of the law of nations, and it damn well is. Private international law cannot violate public international law and the law of nations. Public international law and the law of nations are the same thing. And that falls under Westphalian sense in international law, which says each state has sovereignty over its territory and domestic affairs, to the exclusion of all external powers. Okay, now do you understand why they had to change the states into political units of the United States? Does everybody get it now? The reason why is because they did not want to be in violation of the law of nations. So people say, well, these guys are criminal. They don't listen to the law. No, they listen to the law really well. They know exactly what they're doing. The problem is that the people in this country don't know what they're doing. And this is why we said in one of the beginning programs of the t-roh show that you were in over your head. You don't know how to defend against these guys. We said that in the beginning of the t-roh shows. You guys are in way over your heads because these guys are slick and they know what they're doing. They know international law. They're raised with it from children. They don't go to stupid public schools. They go to secret schools and learn all this kind of stuff. Schools that are run by the Masonic Order and all that, they learn this stuff. Okay, so they did not want to be in violation of public international law and the law of nations by confiscating your guns. They did this same thing to Germany. Germany never caught it. They did the same thing to England. England never caught what they were doing. France never caught what they were doing. Okay, when all those countries gave up their currency, their individual currency, they gave up their borders. The international bankers knew exactly what they were doing when they brought the EU together, and they knew that they were ripping off all the sovereignty. So that being said, they knew, and they already had it planned in the beginning for the Muslim countries to come over and what they call integrate into society. Well, there is no society because they took away what? They took away their identity through their national currency. That's why we have the continental dollar back. Your currency identifies you. The mark of a treasonist is when a senator of one country has the gold of a sovereign of another country in his pocket. That's how you tell he's a treasonist or not. He's using somebody else's money and advocating for them. If you watch the movie 300, it was very clear. There's a movie 300 where the 300 men, the king goes and with 300 men and faces a very large, many armies. Well, the treasonist that was there had gold in his pocket of that king. Traitor, traitor, they started yelling. But he was already dead. So, therefore, the aforementioned trustees, principals, and agents are now subject to international arrest by Interpol officers and can spend the rest of their lives in an international prison without the possibility of parole for unwarranted and illegal aggression against the states of the Union within the United States of America. Now, how can we say that? Well, because we know the law of nations. And we are pointing out the device they used back in 1789, how to get around the law of nations. Because they actually claimed that they could define and punish violations of the law of nations. Well, how many times have people been convicted from this point up till now under the law of nations? Not one. No one's ever been convicted of a violation of law of nations by the U.S. Congress or a Congress of the United States, ever. So they threw that in there because they knew what was going to happen. The same thing that Cornwallis said was going to happen. So Cornwallis was not lying to George Washington, was he? He was not lying to anybody. He was telling you what was going to happen, and it happened. So it is redundant at this point in time to mention the 450 million counts of trafficking in persons in violation of public international law, of which the trustees, principals, and agents are subjects thereof. That condition is a foregone conclusion. How do I know that? Because these trustees, principals, and agents are within the United States, and the United States is subject to international law. It says it right in their documents, even though it exists in name only. None of that really matters, does it? However, an attempt to seize the guns of the people is an attempt towards genocide and to conceal and illegally alter the public international record for the purpose of hiding evidence of public international crimes, thereby hiding the trafficking in persons. Any attempt of ordering the agents of the National Lawyers Guild and the American Bar Association to play the non-recognition game will only implicate said agents in the public international crimes. So please, we're telling you of the Lawyers Guild, and please say you don't recognize it so we can identify you. It makes our job a lot easier. So say, oh, I don't recognize that, or we don't recognize the continental dollar. We don't recognize your government. Please say that. We're begging you, please say it so we know who you are. That's how we identify you. Just letting you know. This international public notice is further directed towards any and all agents within the states of the Union that wish to implicate themselves in multiple violations of public international law and the law of nations by enforcing private international law derived from these offshore trusts. Any cooperation with these offshore trustees shall cease and desist immediately, otherwise forever be known as an international criminal. Did we already say it is redundant at this point in time to mention the 450 million counts of trafficking persons? It is, because you're already guilty of that. So it's kind of redundant to say it again. And all we got to do is identify you by stating you don't recognize public international law, trafficking in persons. You don't recognize your treaties. You don't recognize all that stuff. And then you try to change the subject. And we see you do it all the time. Constantly. We've got letters that are doing it. So change the subject, get around it, all that, and maybe somebody won't notice that you just violated multiple public international laws. So these political states within states, the United States of America can't recognize them because they're illegal. Everything the Masonic Order has done since its inception, since the Treaty of Paris of 1783, since the Revolutionary War, since all the way back to your inception, you have done things that are illegal, criminal, and we have no idea why you won't repent and start doing the right thing. You have the ability to make this world a better place. And basically you've made it a cesspool. Every single day of your lives, you work towards hurting and not helping, hurting others and making their lives freaking miserable. When if you just change your ways, you can start doing some good in this world. But I know you want to, you just don't want your masters to figure that out. Anything more to add, John?
No, so that pretty much covered it.
All right. So thanks for listening, folks. I hope that we cleared this up. So just keep in mind if you think, because I think we've had one guy say this on one of the comments. Well, why do this over where you are, where we can do everything like this over here? Well, no, you can't do everything like this over here. It doesn't work that way. Meaning where you are, you're being trafficked offshore. You're in a political state that doesn't exist. That can't exist legally. Norton versus Shelby County. Any illegal act or body that was created is no act at all. There is no state of Minnesota lowercase s. That constitution doesn't legally exist. You get that? It doesn't legally exist. This can't legally exist. So this whole page is blank. Never happened. Only this can exist. That was the original state. And pretty much all those states, this is why the government of the United States of America cannot recognize this state within a state. It's an illegal body politic, per se. It's an illegal political assembly in violation of the law of nations. It can't exist. So the only thing that does exist is the original Constitution of each state. So I hope this helps, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.